No, in Matthew's gospel, Jesus is on his way to Caesarea Philippi, and he asks the disciples, "Who do the people say that I am?" Peter says that you are the Christ. Then after that, he says, "Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." So you have gates of hell, you have a rock, you have the word Christ, and then you have Caesarea Philippi. How the heck do all of these details come together to make any sense? It's like a puzzle that's hard to put together. Well, I know the secret of putting it all together, so let's find out what's going on. So, in order to understand what's really happening here, we have to really go back to the Israelites' experience in the desert. So they're in the desert, and their food there is basically water and manna. So it's bread and water. When they finally, after 40 years, when they enter the promised land, their diet changes. When they go there, there's already this beautiful garden that is being taken care of by the Canaanites. And from this garden, they're now going from bread and water to filet mignon and rich, delicious wine with it, and vegetables and fruit and everything. So the Israelites said to the Canaanites who are working these gardens, how do you plant gardens so well? And they said, well, the fertility god. And of course, the Israelites are thinking, well, our God gives us bread and water, and your God gives you all this other nice food. So let's take a look at the fertility god. So the fertility god lives underneath the ground, under the earth. And under the earth in the ancient world was known as Hades or hell. Now, Caesarea Philippi, where Jesus is going, there is a spring there. This is one of the three springs that empty into the Sea of Galilee and then eventually empty out into the Jordan River. So it's a very important spring. And it's through this spring of water that fertilize all the ground that the Israelites are enjoying when they go to Canaan. So you have the underground. So really, the spring is the doorway to the underneath the earth, because that's where the water comes from. It's under the ground, and so this is the door to the underground. And so the Israelites with the Canaanites used to go there to worship the fertility god, because this is the gate where the fertility god would provide water, so that there would be lots of this agriculture and great harvest. So of course, this is not a very good thing in God's sight that the Israelites are turning away from God by going to these Canaanite gods. And so God, instead of abandoning his people, says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fix the problem. The problem is that the people, they keep walking away, turning their back on me and turning to other gods. What the people really need is a good leader. They need leadership to keep them in the presence of God, to convince the people that the true source of life, the true source of living water is from God and not these so-called fertility gods. And so so God raised up a promise. He promised the Davidic line, which is continuous leadership through David and his ancestors. And so now let's go back to the story. So we have Jesus is going to Caesarea Philippi. Now we know that this is the location where they were worshiping these gods. This is the place of the gates of hell, the underworld. And Peter declares that he's Christ, which means that he's part of the Davidic line, and that he is the promise that God, the fulfillment of God's promise that he's going to give us good leadership. So here you have Christ now, who is going to, the purpose of Christ and the good leadership and the Davidic line was to keep the people and prevent them from worshiping false gods. So then we have Peter's being declared as the rock upon this church is built. Now remember, in the desert, God provided water by hitting the rock. Remember that was where the water came from. But Jesus is not just talking about a rock, he's talking about a church. Now, if you go to Ezekiel has a temple, and he describes the future temple as a river that's going to be leaving the temple and bringing life to all the world. So that's the symbolism of the tent of the church, is so that the true living water, the true source of life, is going to be through Christ, leading us and keeping us in Christ's company, rather than going to these false gods where they don't provide really anything. So the lesson here is quite simple, but very, very profound. Christ is a gift from God to prevent us from wandering off to other gods. And in life, the world kind of offers these false opportunities. That they say that money is great, or fame, or fortune, and that's where happiness is going to be really invested in putting our time not in worshiping God, but in pursuing happiness in other ways. And here the story is that no, that is not true at all. It's going to be Christ is really the source of our life, a source of our production, of our success and our happiness, and by following Christ. And Christ is the one, is part of the Davidic line, the Christ, the anointed one, who leads us always in God's presence. So you see all these odd connections, all these details coming very connected when you see the Old Testament as part of the background to understanding what's going on in this particular text. So it's a beautiful story. Brings so Jesus is going on his way to Caesarea Philippi, and there, instead of what you find there is the gates of hell, which is the spring that where the underworld is. Rather that the gates of hell will not prevail. The church, which is the true provider of the living water. Well, I hope you found this video interesting, or at least informative, and I'll see you in the next one.